As I'm sure you're all aware, Greta Thunberg made a rather large voyage on a £4 billion yacht to cross the Atlantic to get to America for the UN conference. And I would say her speech overblew it a bit.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean.
Yes, I agree. So I'm going to ignore you for the rest of the time because you just made the exact point that I would have.
How dare you!
Oh, whatever, let's get on with it. It's not like we're in the dark about what she has to say. So the other day, I was browsing The Guardian, as I usually do, and I came across this article saying Ed Miliband calls for wartime mobilisation to tackle climate change. Yes, if it wasn't bad enough that they have to take your car and air travel, they have to have a wartime-like policy. Ed Miliband has said Labour needs a wartime mobilisation on the climate emergency in the next decade, as he warned the party not to splinter over fixed decarbonisation targets. The former Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change praised Labour activists for their Green New Deal campaign, which demands Labour commit to a net zero carbon date of 2030. The Tories have pledged to do so by 2050 and Liberal Democrats by 2045. Yes, these are all basic dick measuring contests for who can stop people using cars quicker than the other parties. Because honestly, while the main mode of transport for people to get to work is cars, you're never going to see decarbonisation. And honestly, since we're only contributing 1.02% of the fossil CO2 emissions per year, and then we're 17th highest in the world, I can't see the UK going carbon neutral, really helping in the fight of this climate emergency when it comes to CO2 emissions. Because there's a lot more than just CO2 that affects the greenhouse effect. Water vapour is a much more potent compound. But let's get to the point, shall we? We're here to talk about the Green New Deal. Well, let's see what the Labour Party had to say about the Green New Deal at their conference recently.
Hello, Tom Barringer, Tottenham CHP, he, him pronouns. I would like...
For those of you that missed it, yes, he did unironically just say he, him pronouns. The Labour conference was mental this year. The guy says something small about a split motion or something or other, something to do with the convention. It's not relevant, I'm just going to skip it.
Secondly, there was a decision made by the compositing group, the FBU compositing group, to change the title of our motion to Labour's Socialist Green New Deal. That was the title that we agreed on.
Oh, interesting that. Every time I've heard of the Green New Deal, it's just to implement policies to stop climate change. But it's interesting that he brings socialist into it. And the actual policies in it don't appear to have changed. They seem to just wanted to change the name for this conference. Now, why would that be?
That was the title that was agreed on while Harry Donaldson was in the room. We would like to change the title to Labour's Socialist Green New Deal.
I know public speaking's hard, but man, you have got to slow down. But yes, he got up there to basically say, we have changed the name of the Green New Deal to Labour's Socialist Green New Deal. So they seem to not be trying to hide the fact that their green policies are there just to implement socialism now, which I'm happy about because I really don't like it when people lie to me. And of course, the Green Party's only MP, Caroline Lucas, was happy to see that the UK Labour Party had followed the Green Party in adopting the Green New Deal and a 2030 climate target. But she, of course, mentions that they need to radically change management of finance and economy so government can invest, i.e. make it more socialist, end fixation on economic growth, i.e. stop neoliberalism because it's bad, and 3, stop airport expansion and HS2. Yes, stop the public transport, that will really help. Though I do hate HS2, but for different reasons to Caroline Lucas. Well, why don't we actually look into Labour's Green New Deal then? Luckily, they've got a website set up just for me to look through. Labour commits to a Green New Deal. Labour will decarbonise Britain by 2030. How ambitious of you. Our vision. Labour for a Green New Deal envisages a prosperous, socialist, zero-carbon society as the alternative to our current world ridden with political, economical and ecological crises. A Green New Deal will transform the economy through unprecedented investments in technology, infrastructure and people. Further down, it says, our plan. Our campaign of grassroots Labour Party members and trade unionists will organise across the base of our movement, passing motions at local branches and eventually on conference floor. We will put on events across the country laying out a localised vision of a Green New Deal with trade unions at its heart. In other words, they're going to do exactly what 1970s Labour did only that was for a socialist ends, whereas this is for one where we don't put any more carbon into the atmosphere. Absolute pipe dream, I'm telling you. Well, since we already firmly know that this is a socialist policy, why don't we get into the details to see just how red this green policy actually is. As we can see from the Socialist Green New Deal explained page, they have quite a lot of plans. The top row says a commitment to zero carbon emissions by 2030, but we don't need to go into detail for that, that's just making a promise. Rapidly phasing out all fossil fuels. Well, every green movement's been trying to do that for years, I don't need to go into detail. The one I'm interested in is large-scale investment in renewables, so let's have a look. The PDF goes into a quick description of what renewables actually are, saying that large-scale investment in renewables will be essential to decarbonise electricity generation, buildings, industry and transport. They also say they greatly increase energy autonomy by allowing for decentralised community-based energy production, and then go into a non-sequitur by saying renewables have a much lower environmental impact than fossil fuel-based power. Recent years have seen the cost of renewables plummet, falling below new fossil fuel or nuclear power plants. Generally that is true, but that's only because every single first world country in the world has been subsidising these, so it's only been affordable due to the taxpayer subsidising it for the people who actually consume it. The PDF then goes through a few sections about how they're going to phase in renewable energy sources, while explaining how the prices for generating electricity through these renewable sources are generally getting cheaper, which is due to both the free market, which encourages innovation, and also due to subsidies. This is all fine, and their arguments seem at least semi-reasonable. In the subsection Which Renewables, their first paragraph says, rapid transformation of the economy and infrastructure in the manner called for by the Green New Deal will require a massive investment in mainstream renewable technologies, predominantly on and offshore wind and solar photovoltaic power for power production. Buildings and in part industry can then be decarbonised using renewable powered electric heat pumps or zero carbon hydrogen gas made using renewables. By the way, when you burn hydrogen gas, it makes water vapour, which, as I said before, is also a greenhouse gas. So while these paragraphs don't seem too bad, I guess, it all gets a bit nutty at the end. Decentralised, democratically owned, community, energy. This paragraph's about what you'd expect. Large-scale investment in renewables provides an unprecedented opportunity for a step change from bloated, wealth-extracting private energy companies to decentralised, community-led and democratically owned energy systems. I mean, that's just a classic attack the rich line, really. That's nothing more than that. They have no idea that, for example, Shell has recently rebranded itself as a low-carbon business. Just over a year after buying First Utility, Royal Dutch Shell has rebranded the British household energy supplier and is switching all its customers to renewable electricity as the oil and gas giant seeks to expand its low-carbon business. So yes, these bloated, wealth-extracting businesses are literally trying to appeal to you. So please don't try and ignore that just so you can get socialism in. God, what a futile suggestion from me. The PDF also claims that a distributed system also allows people to benefit from demand-side response, saving money by using less electricity or selling their stored energy at peak times, while they can already save money by using less electricity. Electric vehicles can also act as decentralised energy storage units, supplying to the grid when demand is high, well, maybe when Tesla finally make batteries that are powerful enough to do that. There are further opportunities for community-owned low-carbon hydrogen and large-scale energy storage facilities, where appropriate communities could work with local businesses to link district heating systems with heat capture from industry or use solar-generated electricity from a local public buildings out of operational hours. There's actually technically nothing stopping from local communities doing this right now. I don't see why you have to completely change the way the country's infrastructure works to get this working. Like, local businesses would be happy to make more money by selling their electricity this way. This section then goes on to say the new decentralised community-owned system could have a host of benefits, including the reduction of fuel poverty, improving resilience, reduced transmission and distribution costs, and a boost in high-quality green jobs across the UK. To ensure a sustainable and equitable future energy mix, the Green New Deal will also balance the need for a national energy strategy with local determination and autonomy. Well, firstly, those benefits are being provided by the free market anyway. Given I'm actually looking for jobs in the energy sector, there are a hell of a lot that are for green jobs, as you put them. Like, there seems to be a high supply of them compared to ones directly in the oil industry. And secondly, I don't see why a green future has to necessarily be equitable. Why can't you have a sustainable future where there's still inequality? Oh, it's because it's socialist. But don't worry, I already knew that. The section then ends with a dig at the Tories that I can't be bothered to read out. Next, we'll move to the section of a just transition to well-paid, unionised green jobs. Decarbonising our society with a Green New Deal will have implications for workers throughout the entire economy and must therefore be fundamentally worker-led. The total decarbonisation of our economy will require major industrial transformations, including the complete phase-out of fossil fuel productions, ending the generation of electricity from fossil fuels and switching to renewables, transforming steel and cement production, and significantly increasing energy efficiency across the economy to reduce total energy consumption. Thus, those industries whose jobs will be most effective must lead in this transition while being guaranteed employment in the zero-carbon economy. My God, that is a lot of things to promise. The PDF then moves into facts about 7.6% of the working population of the UK being underemployed, mean they have jobs but are working fewer hours than they want or need, or in roles for which they are overqualified. I think that would include me. And 10.4% are overemployed, which they don't go into. They also have to bash zero-hour contracts no matter how many people want them, and they also mention that 69% of children are living in poverty, when it actually means relative poverty, which by international standards is nowhere near poverty. So for some reason, this Green New Deal that is supposed to be about helping the environment is going on about workers' rights, and how it's unfair to the employed in this country, according to Labour. It's like they're not even trying to hide it. But let's see what their answer is for these challenges. Overhauling our energy system, retrofitting buildings, greatly expanding and greening transport, and creating a sustainable agricultural sector represents an incredible opportunity to invest in the previously industrial towns and cities in the UK, many of which continue to suffer the effects of deindustrialisation and the privatisation of many sectors that began under Thatcher and will have been broadly continued since. Of course, they have another dig at Thatcher there, and the paragraph continues saying that the Green New Deal will industrialise these once deindustrialised sectors, but the reason they were deindustrialised was because the UK was turning into a service economy and it was no longer economical to actually invest in industry in these towns anymore. What the Green New Deal is going to do when they work out that renewable energy sources aren't great for the type of power you need to power industrial areas, I don't know. Maybe they'll go the way of Germany and have to fire up coal power stations again, which might be their plan all along to open up the coal mines again. Anyway, let's move on to their main points. The Green New Deal will guarantee a just transition to well-paid, unionised green jobs, available for all who want them. There's a thing called supply and demand labour. I believe you should look into that. Potential labour markets interventions to ensure this process can include immediate repeal of anti-union legislation alongside new interventions to empower unions, grow membership and revitalise the trade union movement. Oh my God, don't do that again. Public investment and public support for private investment in industry to be tied to conditions on investment regarding local supply and fair work. 3. Greatly improve research into and anticipation of probable employment and skills demand on an occupational and sectorial basis at UK, national and regional levels. So, right, so you're going to do that, but you're also going to make green jobs available for all who want them. Right, okay. Just transition agreements to be negotiated with workers and or union representatives in key industrial sectors alongside regulation of key sectors like energy production to require just transition plans which include conditions about local supply and fair work. 5. Securing good employment for those whose jobs are incompatible with a zero-carbon economy, with jobs guarantees that offer workers the opportunity to retrain and enter a new role under the same or improved conditions. So, this is just like a 5-year plan. You can't push these things like that. These things have to happen gradually over time because there are so many things that could go wrong with that. 6. Retraining of existing workers to be provided by employers, with training of new workers in key sectors to be publicly funded. Yes, there we go again. It's all got to be publicly funded. Spend, spend, spend. 7. Tailored programmes to improve the inclusion of groups systematically disadvantaged to the existing labour markets. Well, we have to get some postmodernism in there, don't we? So there you go. Their ideas to try and push this green initiative are essentially things they've been pushing all the time. All they have to include in it is to make sure when they say industrial jobs, they say green jobs, because that's all socialism has pushed for the past century. The next one I'm going to go through is called Expanding Public Democratic Ownership. Once again, it's a very socialist opening paragraph. The Green New Deal requires a complete transformation of the structure and principles of our economy. The prevailing neoliberal ideologies of private ownership, value extraction and profit maximisation from the root of the crisis we face, of climate change, economic inequality, housing, biodiversity and international and integrational inequality, the Green New Deal therefore requires a new and alternative forms of public and community ownership which will prioritise shared public wealth as a precondition for counteracting the ideologies of the free market and private ownership. Now that sounds eerily similar to a lot of things said in Aaron Bastani's book, Fully Automated Luxury Communism, and that is a review I am still working on. I'm still working through the script. It is going to be very long, just give me time. But that whole paragraph looks like it's come straight out of the book, and I know the book very, very well. Given the failure of the private sector to deliver on essential economic imperatives, including combating inequality and energy poverty, tackling our housing crisis, and supporting environmental and climate sustainability, alternative forms of ownership are required to 1. Encourage long-term thinking in economic activity to render the UK economy more sustainable by increasing productivity and investment, including in higher wages, and shifting business emphasis from short-term profits to long-term viability, as if private businesses don't already think long-term. 2. Strengthen democratic process and accountability so the economy serves the need and interests of the many rather than the privileged few. Oh, if only our democracy was as accountable as I'd like it to be. 3. Remedy the desperate shortage of public funding caused by austerity and the decline of national tax revenues by ensuring wealth is retained and owned by those who create it. Number 4. Address the abject failure of privatisation which has decreased service quality and reduced productive investment, extracting public money for private profit and shareholder value, while raising consumer costs, often in companies based abroad and or in tax havens. Number 5. Harnessing the potential of automation and digitisation of the economy for the working class and ensuring the benefits are widely shared while preventing potential associated harms such as monopolisation, rent extraction and job insecurity. So, i.e. try and have the freest market as possible while making it as socialist as possible. Because these things are generally happening already over time in the private sector. Their problem is that the private sector isn't perfect and therefore it needs to be razed to the ground and replaced with a socialist one, which has a much, much worse track record. But of course they'll say this Green New Deal is there and necessary to save the planet, which couldn't be more wrong. The PDF then goes into exactly what public ownership would look like, and it goes off this thing called the Preston model, which is also explained in Fully Automated Luxury Communism, but they make 8 points about it. Organisations such as the Centre for Local Economic Strategies and its Preston model of CWB are pioneering this agenda, which entails 1. Harnessing the potential of anchor institutions, i.e. local authorities, NHS trusts, trade unions, local businesses, housing associations, through increased commissioning and progressive procurement of goods and services via local supply chains. Recognising the benefits of public land property ownership and pension funds for local economies, encouraging local currencies, local banks, community shares, community energy schemes, and living wage activities, advancing the foundation economy, i.e. utilities, care sector, local retail, developing circular ownership models which retain wealth in the community, co-ops, community interest companies, etc. Investigating the potential of smart technologies to promote a new collaborative economy, stimulating growth and social responsibility among local businesses and expanding employee involvement on company boards, creating deeper relationships between producers and consumers, allowing greater sensitivity to social concerns and unmet needs. To put a long story short, the Preston model is essentially protectionism on a local scale, in this case the city of Preston. And lucky for me, Christian Niemiec did a review of Fully Automated Luxury Communism and directly refuted the Preston model. Virtually all economists, including vocal left-wingers such as Paul Krugman and Joseph Stiglitz, agree on the benefits of free trade and the inadequacy of protectionism. If this is true at the national level, it must be a fortiori true at the local level, which makes municipal protectionism a complete non-starter. The idea that cities can get rich by preventing money leaking out is so preposterous that it does not deserve a serious rebuttal. Let's just say this. If protectionism works for the Preston model as a whole, why not go a step further and stop the north of Preston from trading with the south of Preston? Would that not make both of them even richer because North Preston's money would no longer leak out to South Preston and vice versa? So there you go. This whole policy is disastrous from the start. And from that, I no longer need to refute this part of the policy myself. But I think I will now move on to another section, which is welcoming climate refugees and preventing displacement. Yes, as if climate justice wasn't enough for this policy, they also have to get the social justice in. The opening paragraph makes the point that a number of recent extreme weather events and disasters have proven the climate crisis is already impacting the lives of people around the world, and that the communities most affected by this are communities that have had least to contribute to it, at least according to this PDF. It also mentions British colonialism and imperialism, where the UK gained its wealth, and particularly through violence of natural resource extraction. I don't understand how you can say violence of natural resource extraction. They were generally different areas where the violence and the resource extraction happened. They also mention that the current economic system relies on people regarded as illegal or documented to create cheap labour for the conglomerate corporations. Well, believe it or not, given that they are deemed illegal, they shouldn't even be in the country, and therefore, yes, I am also against this as well. But, well, how are they going to go about the UK's massive, massive evil of having an empire like every other Western country did, and also pumping out CO2 like 16 other countries are doing more than us? A Green New Deal must therefore commit to addressing the climate crisis through the lens of global justice and migrant justice. Why they don't just say social justice is beyond me. This is particularly important in light of the UK's colonial legacy, with both historical and ongoing contributions to global emissions and border-related violence. Climate justice is migrant justice, and a Green New Deal must therefore support both the right to move and the right to stay. This should include reform to existing immigration laws, including the immediate abolition of the hostile environment, a commitment to supporting those displaced by natural disasters, and a changing climate, and immediate action to dismantle the fundamentally racist and unjust Fortress Britain and Fortress Europe. Yes, the Green New Deal says that it is unjust to enforce your borders. What a surprise. A Green New Deal should focus on migrant justice and ending the hostile environment, refugee status for those forced to move because of climate change, and supporting the right to stay through internationalism. In other words, the UK should do all it can with this deal to help every other country in the world. Now, I am actually okay with helping other countries as much as possible, but I'm a big believer in fixing your own home first, and the UK is nowhere near doing that, and this Green New Deal doesn't seem to be helping in any way because it seems to just make another socialist hellhole, and we've had well over a dozen of them. But due to our colonial history, apparently we now have to self-flagellate and do all we can to help those that we did injustices to, even though they were well over 100 years ago. And by the way, we still have good connections and good relationships with our old colonies. The PDF later goes into the problem they had with the Hostile Environment Act, such as deportation targets and a deport first, appeal later approach. The Windrush scandal is mentioned, the fact that NHS workers, landlords and employers have to check immigration status to check they are housing a legal immigrant, encouraging voluntary deportation such as through the racist go home vans. How they're a racist is still not really explained, and so basically this is just another standard Labour policy inserted into the Green New Deal to try and wave under the noses to say, you want to help the environment, don't you? Oh, by the way, you have to turn into a socialist to do that. Or in this specific case, you have to relax your opinions on immigration policy. The final section that I will just quickly go through is called Assuring Everyone's Basic Rights Through Provision of Universal Services. And this is again something taken straight from fully automated luxury communism. And honestly, I don't think I have to read much more than the summary of this. The Green New Deal is more than just a plan for decarbonising our existing economy. Rather, it is a strategy for building a new socialist economy run by and for the many. A bold, transformative vision for the economy must tackle the climate crisis while also addressing inequality and improving the lives of the people of the UK. The Green New Deal is rooted in the recognition that the crisis of inequality and climate change are symptoms of the same failing economic system and must therefore be addressed as one. An essential part of doing this will be the provision of universal basic services, a proposal founded on understanding that everyone should have their basic needs met in order for them to thrive in and contribute to society regardless of immigration status. When we actually go into the PDF, it's not really that much better. I think it can be summarised with this small section. There have been many attempts made to determine precisely what services UBS should cover. The following represents a proposed but not exhaustive set of services. It includes education, health and social care, energy, water, housing, transport, information technology, and food. Rather than lay out a decisive plan for UBS with a Green New Deal, the following will instead provide the justification for why some form of UBS will constitute an essential pillar in the transformation of our economy, using a few proposed services to demonstrate the transformative potential. Fundamentally, the strength of UBS derives from its inclusivity, providing services for all who need them, irrespective of ability to pay. A well-designed system of UBS will reduce inequalities by providing the greatest benefit to those with the lowest income groups, while facilitating lower carbon emissions and creating value for society as a whole. So this isn't actually a plan or any part of the deal. It's literally just there to say, hey, we also need socialism with this, guys. Since there are no specific policies that I can actually get behind, I'm just going to go straight to the root of where this has come from, which is fully automated luxury communism. So yes, I'm going back to Christian Niemitz's review. The review says, Bastani briefly toys with the idea of universal basic income, but quickly dismisses it in favour of the in-kind version, universal basic services. This is mostly because variants of UBI have also been advocated by people he dislikes, namely Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, which makes the idea suspect. He also sees UBS as yet another way to reduce the role of the market and increase the role of the state in economic life. Under a UBS system, the state would provide the necessities of life generously defined to everyone free at the point of use. Central banks would also play their part. In the transition to FALC, the role of central banks will continue once more, the emphasis moving away from low inflation to raising wages, high productivity and affordable house prices. Taken together, such measures would create a heavily state-dominated, hyper-politicised economy. This is where Bastani's roadmap ends. What the final steps towards full communism will look like, or indeed what FALC itself would look like in practice, does not become clear. But I think I've made my point more than thoroughly at this point. This Green New Deal appears on the surface to be just there to help the environment and reduce carbon dioxide, and then quickly devolves into we need socialism now, otherwise the country and the world is absolutely screwed, once again because of Britain's action. It's why they bring up colonialism again, because the systems that we put in place and created, that created the modern world, and by the way, the modern world's pretty good, had some problems, and cause some people to suffer, which, don't get me wrong, I am sympathetic to. But we don't just turn to fully automated luxury communism because we think neoliberalism, or whatever you want to call it, is bad. And to be honest, the PDFs are more about bitching about the Tories and current policy than actually bringing alternatives about. And the policy that they did show is basically just state control over all resources and heavily politicising the means of production, which, as a liberal capitalist, I really don't want. But that's pretty much everything I had for you today, so, once again, thank you very much for watching, and as usual, I will see you next time. Goodbye.